Earlier in the week, the MyEFO budget report was released. Against all expectations, I managed to sit down on this show. You wouldn't have thought it, would you? Managed to sit down on this show with Treasurer Scott Morrison. Mr. Scott Morrison, thank you for joining us on the program this evening.
Pleasure to be here, Anthony.
Are you and Joe Hockey the same person?
No.
I'll tell you why I asked that question. Critics of the budget update are saying that you've been unnecessarily harsh on health, welfare and aged care.
The priority is getting our budget back to surplus.
Keep in mind, this statement doesn't even return us to surplus.
We're taking a little longer to get there. We're just being realistic.
Your predecessor, Joe Hockey, was dumped from the position of Treasurer amid criticisms that his budget outcomes were unfair. How do you respond to criticisms that you and he are the same person pursuing the same financial outcome?
We're not the same person.
I actually sat down and spoke to Mr. Hockey back when he was still Treasurer. Mr. Hockey, thank you so much for coming on to the program.
It's a pleasure to be here, Anthony.
Critics of the budget say that you've been pretty savage with health, welfare and aged care.
The priority is getting the budget back to surplus.
Keep in mind this budget doesn't actually return us to surplus.
We're taking a little longer to get there. We're just being realistic.
Isn't taking a little longer to get back to surplus the exact same thing that your predecessor Wayne Swan was doing?
He and I are completely different people. Now, I say that with no disrespect to him. It's just a different ball game now.
Now, that was 1 year ago. Mr. Scott Morrison, how are you and Joe Hockey different?
He and I are completely different people. I say that with absolutely no disrespect to him, but it's a different ball game now.
I want to concentrate on the issue of returning to budget surplus a little slower than expected.
Sure.
Do you think it's fair for people to be disappointed when you've promised to return us to surplus and now that you're in the position you're in, you're saying, oh, well, it's going to take a little bit longer?
We're just being realistic and responsible economic managers.
And you're saying that you and Joe Hockey are not the same person?
That's right.
Because this is also from the exact same Joe Hockey interview. Mr. Hockey, do you think it's fair for people to be disappointed when you've said you're going to return us to surplus and now that you're in this position, you're saying it's going to take a little longer?
We're just being realistic and responsible economic managers.
Isn't that the exact same thing that your predecessor Wayne Swan said when he was Treasurer?
He and I are completely different people.
Well, I got the opportunity to sit down and talk to Mr. Wayne Swan when he was still Treasurer. Mr. Wayne Swan, thank you for joining us on the program.
It's a pleasure to be here, Anthony.
Do you think it's fair for people to be disappointed when you have promised to bring us back to budget surplus and now that you're in this position, you're saying it's going to take a little bit longer?
We're just being realistic and responsible economic managers.
Now that was God knows how many years ago. Mr. Scott Morrison, are you and Wayne Swan the same person?
Wayne Swan wants to retain government services while Mr. Hockey and I want to cut those same services back.
So you and Joe Hockey are the same person?
No, well, yes.
Wayne Swan chose to return us to surplus slower, but also retain services. You have chosen to return us to surplus slower, but also cut services. Now, if voters had the choice between those two options, why on earth would they choose that one?
They wouldn't.
So, with all due respect, why are we voting for you?
Because I'm not me, I'm actually Wayne Swan. You shouldn't vote for me, Wayne Swan, you should vote for me, Scott Morrison.
Are you actually Wayne Swan, or are you Scott Morrison saying you're Wayne Swan, so we'll vote for Scott Morrison?
Absolutely.
Mr. Morrison, thank you for your time.
I don't even go here.